painting at a garage sale for just $7. She simply wanted to decorate her home and had no idea that beneath the layer of dirt was a secret experts had been searching for over 200 years. When restorers removed the top layer, they couldn't believe their eyes. This discovery changed her life forever and made her a millionaire. Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which country you're watching from. Evelyn Harris woke before the sun most mornings, not because she needed to, but because her body had grown accustomed to the rhythm of years spent rising early for work, for family, for everything except herself. At 70 years old, she still stretched gently before stepping out of bed, mindful of the stiffness in her knees and the ache that lingered in her lower back, souvenirs of a long life lived without luxury. The small house she occupied was quiet, so still that sometimes she imagined she could hear echoes of past laughter within its walls. The living room held the soft indent of her late husband James's favorite chair, and their wedding photo still stood proudly on the mantel as if daring time to challenge its importance. Evelyn took comfort in these familiar things, though each carried the bittersweet weight of memory. Her home was tidy, though humble. A patchwork of crocheted blankets lay draped over the sofa, works of her own hands that kept her warm through winter and busy through loneliness. The linoleum floor in the kitchen bore scratches from decades of foot traffic, and the stove, though old, still heated a pot of strong tea each morning. She made do, always had. She wasn't ashamed of her modest means, but there were days when the weight of bills stacked in the drawer pressed on her chest more heavily than her age ever could. The neighborhood around her had changed over the years. Children she once watched take their first steps had grown, moved away, and been replaced by new families whose names she did not yet know. Still, she greeted everyone she saw. She was a constant, a presence people relied on for small kindnesses. Mrs. Turner next door often knocked on her door for a bit of sugar or help deciphering mail. Mr. Alvarez from the corner grocery always waved and set aside her favorite bread when he knew it was on sale. Evelyn believed that community was stitched from these little acts of care. James had always told her that beauty could be found anywhere if one learned how to look. When he passed, an illness that came swiftly and left devastation in its wake, Evelyn had clung to that belief, searching for sparks of joy in the smallest corners of each day. A bloomin' flower in her garden, a sunny afternoon, a cup of tea that tasted just right. She didn't need much. She never had. But since James's death, the silence in the house sometimes grew too deep, and she found herself speaking aloud to his photograph just to feel the air move. One such morning, with the sky still pale and dew clinging to blades of grass outside her window, Evelyn spotted a flyer tucked beneath her door. "Community Garage Sale Today," it read in bright red letters. Beneath it, a list of addresses, including one only a short walk away. She studied the crumpled paper while sipping her tea, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. She didn't need anything, not really, but sometimes it was nice to get out and see people. Maybe she'd find a little lamp or a cooking pot to replace one whose handle had broken years ago. Evelyn counted money from a small envelope she kept in a kitchen drawer. $11.53, her discretionary funds for the week. She tucked 7 of those dollars into her purse and set the rest back in the drawer. Practicality ruled her decisions. She had long ago mastered the art of stretching every penny. The morning air felt cool but friendly as she stepped outside, locking her door behind her. Along the sidewalk, she walked past blooming azalea bushes and the sound of children laughing somewhere out of sight. With each step, she reminded herself that today would be pleasant. even if she returned home with nothing. She touched the strap of her purse nervously, unsure if spending money on something frivolous was wise. Still, she continued forward. When she reached the address listed on the flyer, she found a lively scene. Tables were scattered across a front lawn, piled high with everything imaginable. Old vinyl records, mismatched silverware, stacks of novels whose pages had yellowed with age. Sunlight caught the edges of glass dishes and vases, making them sparkle like hidden treasures waiting to be claimed. People murmured excitedly as they rummaged through bins of clothing and toys. The air carried the faint scent of fresh-cut grass and the sweetness of pastries someone was selling from a fold-out table near the garage. Evelyn wandered slowly, hands clasped behind her back, taken in the scene with curiosity. Every item seemed to hold a story, a memory from someone else's life. A chipped ceramic bowl reminded her of the one she used to have before she dropped it while washing dishes in a hurry. A pair of men's leather gloves made her think of James's hands, strong, warm, always ready to help. She forced herself to look away before tears could threaten her calm. Then she saw it. A painting leaning against the wall near a table of dusty antiques. It was framed in thick, ornate wood, heavy-looking and darkened with age. The image beneath the cloudy, scratched glass was even darker, a murky landscape filled with indistinct shapes. Browns, grays, and a sickly yellowish tint conspired to give the painting a dreary presence, as though it absorbed rather than reflected light. Yet something about it tugged at her attention. Perhaps it was the uneasy feeling that the painting was not what it appeared to be. Perhaps, deep inside, the spark of James's old belief whispered through her thoughts. Beauty waits to be seen. As she drew closer, a voice greeted her warmly. "Mornin' there," an elderly man said, stepping toward her. He wore a plaid shirt tucked into khaki trousers, and his white hair was combed back neatly, though his eyes looked tired, as if life had worn him down piece by piece. "Interested in the old thing? Been in my family longer than I can remember." Evelyn smiled politely. "It's unusual," she said carefully, not wanting to insult the man's possessions. He chuckled as though he already suspected the truth. "My wife used to say it made the room look like a funeral parlor. It's one of those pieces you either love or can't stand to look at." He hesitated before his expression softened. "I'm downsizing, moving to a senior home next month. My daughter says it's time to let go of the past." His voice faltered slightly, revealing what it cost him to say those words. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said gently. She understood that kind of loss, when one has to shrink their world into something smaller when memories become too heavy to carry. "Oh, it's all right," he replied, waving a hand. "Life moves on whether you want it to or not. Anyway, if you're interested, I'm asking $7 for it. Just enough to cover a nice lunch this afternoon." $7. Evelyn felt the number hit her like a small jolt. It was a sizable portion of her spending money. She lifted the painting carefully, surprised by its weight. The frame was real wood, not the cheap hollow kind often found in discount stores. As she tilted it slightly, she noticed a streak of color, just the faintest hint of brilliant blue at the corner, almost entirely hidden beneath smoke-dark paint. It made her pulse quicken unexpectedly. She looked at the man again. He waited, hopeful but not pushing her. She thought of James, of how he would pause for beautiful things even when they were inconvenient. And she thought of her own life, quiet, repetitive, needing tiny moments of wonder to break the sameness. "I'll take it," she said softly. The man's eyes brightened with gratitude. He helped wrap the painting in a blanket to protect the glass and thanked her sincerely, as though she had done him a kindness by accepting it. Evelyn felt a strange warmth inside her chest as she handed over the $7, not regret, but a flutter of anticipation. It was a small risk, but one she was willing to take. Carrying the painting home proved a challenge. Its weight forced her to stop twice to rest, leaning it against a fence post while she caught her breath. A neighbor driving by offered to help, but she politely declined. She wanted this, whatever it was, to be entirely hers from start to finish. By the time she reached her porch, her arms were trembling from the strain, yet she felt an odd pride. She had chosen something that made her heart curious again. Inside, she propped the painting against her living room wall, stepping back to examine it in a better light. Afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The painting looked no different, muddy, somber, dull, yet that hint of blue she had glimpsed earlier still lingered in her mind, teasing her imagination. After a simple lunch, she searched her drawer for an old cloth and mild cleaner. She sat cross-legged on the floor, leaning the painting gently against her knees. With slow, cautious strokes, she wiped away years of dust from the frame and the edges of the glass. The surface grime lifted easily, but it did little to improve the painting itself. The image beneath remained stifled by darkness. Evelyn's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. She set aside the cloth and stood up, walking to the kitchen, where she rummaged for a cotton swab and a slightly stronger cleaning solution, one she used sparingly to scrub stubborn stains from porcelain. She returned to the painting, kneeling before it with a mix of determination and hesitation. She dipped the swab lightly into the solution and pressed it against the lower corner of the painting. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, as she rolled the swab back and forth, the murky brown lightened. Beneath it, a vivid stroke of blue emerged, clear, bright, and startlingly alive compared to the gloom surrounding it. Evelyn froze, staring, hardly breathing. She wiped again, more carefully this time. The blue expanded, revealing the edge of something. A garment? Sky? Water? She couldn't be sure yet, but the certainty hit her like a soft gasp. There was something beautiful hidden underneath. A thrill shot through her veins, one she hadn't felt in years. The painting was hiding secrets, something masked, smothered, concealed. And she was the one uncovering it, piece by piece. The sun dipped lower outside, casting longer shadows across her living room, but she didn't move until the room grew too dim to continue. She sat back, still stunned, staring at the tiny window of color she had freed from darkness. Her heart beat faster than usual, the discovery igniting a rush of hope she had not expected to feel again. What if this wasn't just an ugly picture after all? What if it was something more? That night, Evelyn left the painting propped exactly where it was, the exposed patch of blue like a secret whispering from beneath a blanket. She made tea but forgot to drink it, her mind swirling with possibilities. It could be nothing. Just a quirk of paint, a layered mistake by some fledgling artist, and yet she could not shake the feeling that she had stumbled onto a mystery far greater than she had intended to purchase. As she prepared for bed, she paused in the doorway and glanced back at the painting one more time. The fragment of color seemed to glow faintly in the gloom, as though the art itself were trying to breathe after decades of suffocation. Evelyn whispered into the quiet, as if speaking to an old friend, "What are you?" The only answer was silence, but a silence charged with promise. She turned off the light and let the room fall into darkness, unaware that with a simple swipe of a cotton swab, Her life had begun to shift in a way she could never have imagined. Evelyn woke the next morning with the kind of excitement she hadn't felt since she was a little girl opening presents on Christmas. Sleep had come in short, eager bursts, her mind filled with flashes of that bright streak of blue she had revealed the night before. As sunlight streamed through her curtains, she hurried to her living room, half afraid that she might find the painting unchanged, that it had all been the result of her imagination. But there it was, leaning exactly where she had left it, the vivid patch of blue gleaming like a fragment of sky fallen from a better world. It had not vanished. It was real. She knelt beside it once more, breathing in the dusty scent of old varnish. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with the delicate anticipation of someone on the edge of discovering something extraordinary without knowing exactly what that might be. The cotton swabs lay ready, the cleaning solution beside them like tools in an archaeologist's kit. She wasn't sure what she expected to find beneath the oppressive darkness of the surface layer, but something deep within her insisted it was worth the risk. With careful strokes, she continued to clean. Each swipe removed a sliver of grime and a portion of the somber overpainting. It was slow, incredibly slow. The top layer resisted her touch in places, as though determined to cling to the secrets it concealed. But as the minutes turned into hours, the painting began to reveal fragments of something far more intricate and vibrant beneath, shimmering colors that did not belong to the bleak scene above. A curl of gold, perhaps part of hair, a sliver of creamy skin tone, a curved line that hinted at a shoulder. The more she cleared, the more the image underneath seemed to emerge like a prisoner stretching toward freedom after a lifetime in darkness. At one point, Evelyn sat back on her heels, stunned by her own boldness. What was she doing? This wasn't a hobby for a lonely widow. This was delicate work trained professionals would handle with magnifying glasses and expensive tools, not with a 70-year-old woman in a living room with a cotton swab. Her heart thudded with sudden worry. What if she damaged something priceless? What if she had already? Fear clutched her chest as she looked down at the tiny pile of smeared paint chips gathered on her cloth. Her excitement wavered, replaced by a near panic that she was meddling in something she did not understand. She put the swab down and forced herself to breathe slowly. James's voice seemed to echo from the past, gentle and encouraging. He would have reminded her that she had good instincts, that she always acted with care, that beauty, real beauty, deserved to be seen. Even so, Evelyn knew she needed help. She stood, brushing the stiffness from her knees, and shuffled into her kitchen. The phone sat on the counter, an older model with large buttons, simple, reliable, comforting. She stared at it for a long moment before finally dialing the number for the local university. She had seen their advertisements in newspapers and heard mentions on the radio, the State University Art Conservation Center. They specialized in restoring old paintings, studying their origins, and verifying their authenticity. If anyone could tell her what she had found, or what she might ruin if she continued on her own, it would be them. When the receptionist answered, Evelyn introduced herself politely and explained in a shaky voice that she had purchased a painting that seemed to have another hidden beneath the surface. She spoke modestly, almost apologetically, aware of how ridiculous she must sound. The receptionist, to her relief, did not laugh or dismiss her. Instead, she asked a few practical questions: size of the painting, materials, and age. Details Evelyn only partly knew but tried her best to describe. After a pause, the receptionist offered her an appointment later that afternoon, Assuring her that the center often examined such pieces for community members and hobbyists, Evelyn thanked her repeatedly, relieved that someone had taken her seriously. The hours before the appointment passed painfully slowly. Evelyn tidied the house, although nothing needed cleaning, changed her outfit twice, and reheated her tea 3 times without ever finishing it. Finally, the time came to wrap the painting carefully in a soft blanket and place it gently in the back seat of a taxi she'd called, her heart hammering against her ribs the entire ride. The university campus was a sprawling expanse of modern buildings and manicured lawns. Students crossed the walkways in groups, laughing and chatting, backpacks slung casually over their shoulders. Evelyn felt the familiar prickle of self-consciousness that sometimes came with being the oldest face in a young environment. Yet, she clung to the fact that she had a purpose here, something valid, something important. The Art Conservation Center was bustling yet mindful, its halls lined with a framed works accompanied by explanatory plaques. A young student guided her to a brightly lit laboratory room that smelled faintly of chemicals and old canvas. Work tables held half-cleaned paintings, jars of pigments, fine brushes, and strange devices Evelyn had never seen before. The contrast between this sleek world and her little living room made her clutch her purse nervously. Then she met Dr. Nigel Winston. He introduced himself with a gentle handshake and a warm smile that immediately eased some of her tension. His appearance conveyed both intelligence and humility. Thin-framed glasses, dark hair streaked with early gray, and a quiet curiosity in his gaze. He spoke to her as an equal, not as someone whose presence required justification. "Let's take a look, shall we?" he said kindly, helping her unwrap the blanket. His posture changed subtly the moment he lifted the frame. What had first been an indulgent curiosity blossomed into serious interest. He carried the painting to a specialized table beneath a bright spotlight and leaned in close, examining the visible streaks where Evelyn had cleaned the surface. "Fascinating," he murmured, prompting Evelyn's heart to flutter. He studied the glossy, discolored lacquer, tracing a finger across textured brushstrokes. He then glanced over his shoulder. "Have you done any restoration work before?" "No," Evelyn admitted, suddenly self-conscious. "Just cleaning." "You were very careful," he reassured her, and she nearly sagged in relief. He tapped the edge of the frame. "May I test this under ultraviolet light? It's a common method to detect changes and overpainting, nothing invasive." "Yes, of course," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He lowered the lights, and the room plunged into a deep violet glow as he switched on a handheld UV scanner. The painting, under the strange radiance, transformed into something spectral. Patches of fluorescent color flared where the top layer thinned, revealing shapes that clearly did not belong to the drab landscape. He sucked in a sharp breath. "There's definitely another image beneath this," he said, sounding both excited and cautious. He pointed to the glowing outlines. "These are characteristic of an older layer, different composition, different artistic intent altogether." He turned to her, eyes bright. "I think you might have something quite special here." Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest as joy and disbelief crashed together in her heart. Dr. Winston carefully explained why certain pigments glowed and why others remained dark, describing eras and techniques as though recounting distant history. And in truth, he was. Evelyn clung to every word, though she grasped only part of the science behind it. What mattered, what she understood fully, was that the buried layer did not look crude or accidental. It looked intentional, meaningful. He asked if he could take the painting into further care for deeper analysis. Evelyn hesitated, the idea of parting with her discovery tugging at her chest like a thread. But she knew it was necessary. She had reached the edge of what she could safely do alone. He sensed her inner struggle and gave her a reassuring smile. It will be treated with the utmost respect, and if there is truly something remarkable beneath this paint, we'll find out. She nodded, grateful for his patience. She signed the necessary paperwork confirming her ownership and granting permission for scientific evaluation. Her signature wobbled slightly on the paper, but her decision did not. Before she left, Dr. Winston rolled the painting into a secure storage rack that held dozens of other canvases, each awaiting its own rebirth. He promised updates within a few days, optimistic ones at that. Walking out into the crisp air of late afternoon, Evelyn felt lightheaded. The world seemed to shimmer a little brighter, the rustling leaves whispering hints of possibility. She wasn't sure what the painting would reveal, but she knew this much: her life had shifted. She had stumbled, through nothing more than curiosity and instinct, into a mystery far larger than herself. All evening, she replayed her visit in her mind. Dr. Winston's expression of growing excitement, the glowing outlines beneath the surface, the strange certainty that something lost was close to being found. Every time she tried to sit still, she found herself pacing instead, clutching a pillow or talking softly to James's photo as though he were sitting beside her. "What if it's a real piece of art?" she whispered to the empty living room. What if it changes everything?" The house remained silent, but the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt anticipatory. She went to bed hoping for dreams, but sleep stayed shallow and restless. The blue fragment she had uncovered haunted the edges of her consciousness. It shone like a beacon in the dark, promising answers yet to come. And beneath that promise, a truth already took root inside her. The painting wanted to be seen. It had waited through decades, maybe centuries, for someone to notice it. And that someone, somehow, was her. For the first time in a very long while, Evelyn Harris felt that fate had reached out to touch her. And she was ready to discover where that touch would lead. The call came 3 days later, just as Evelyn finished arranging freshly washed dishes in her cupboard. The phone's sharp ring startled her, sending a porcelain plate slipping from her damp fingers, but she managed to catch it against her hip before it could shatter. Breathless, she set it safely on the counter and wiped her hands hurriedly on her apron before reaching for the receiver. The voice on the other end was calm, yet laced with urgency. Dr. Winston requested that she come to the Art Conservation Center as soon as possible. His tone left no room for delay. Evelyn's heart thudded wildly against her ribs, anticipation tangling with dread. Something had been found. Something real. She didn't even pause to remove her apron before grabbing her purse and locking the door behind her. When she arrived at the center, the building felt different from her first visit. The same white walls and polished floors, the same quiet but busy hum, yet now there was an air of expectation, as though the walls themselves leaned in to witness what was about to unfold. A nervous student led her not to the smaller lab from before, but to a deeper room, one she had not been permitted to enter last time. A secure restoration suite lined with climate-controlled glass cases and advanced equipment humming softly. It was a place reserved for delicate miracles and sacred history. Dr. Winston stood waiting at a central workstation beneath a halo of bright lights. When he saw her, a warm, sympathetic smile broke across his face. Not pity, not condescension, something closer to shared awe. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Mrs. Harris," he said. His voice carried both excitement and solemnity. "We have quite a lot to show you." Her gaze drifted past him to the painting resting on a cushioned stand. The transformation was stunning. Large swaths of the muddy overpainting were gone, replaced by colors that seemed to glow under the controlled lights. Deep blues like twilight sky, luminous skin tones, fine golden strokes catching highlights with breathtaking delicacy. A figure was taking shape. The upper half of a woman, her hair elegantly curled, pearls glimmering at her neck, eyes cast gently toward something invisible beyond the frame. It was as though she had been asleep for centuries, waiting for someone to grant her sight again. Evelyn gasped and stepped closer, both hands pressed against her chest as if to calm her racing heart. "Oh my goodness." Her voice emerged as a whisper swallowed by wonder. "She's beautiful." "She is," Dr. Winston agreed, his eyes reflecting the same astonishment. "And she has a story to tell." He motioned for her to sit, and though her legs felt like trembling reeds, she managed to lower herself into a chair opposite the painting. A small group of experts gathered nearby, 2 art historians, a conservator, and a museum curator, each one bearing expressions of reverence. They introduced themselves to her personally, treating her not like an outsider but as someone central to their discovery. It made her feel unexpectedly important. Dr. Winston retrieved a folder thick with printed scans and images. He spread out several before her. UV radiographs, pigment charts, microscopic images of paint layers showing distinct eras of artistic technique. He spoke gently but clearly, translating scientific jargon into terms she could grasp. "This painting," he said, pointing to an early scan showing the hidden portrait, "is dated from the 17th century, the Dutch Golden Age. The pigments beneath the surface correspond precisely with those used by a particular group of master painters of that period." His finger traced the graceful curve of the woman's jawline. Her features, her attire, even the background elements we've begun to uncover suggest an aristocratic subject. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in before continuing. "Based on stylistic analysis, comparison to cataloged works, and the early monograms exposed under magnification, we believe this painting is by a highly regarded artist thought to have lost several pieces during the turmoil of 18th and 19th century Europe. In fact," he exchanged a meaningful glance with one of the historians, whose smile widened with electric energy, "we have identified this as a missing masterpiece recorded in historical archives, but never physically located." Evelyn stared at him blankly for several heartbeats, her mind grappling with the enormity of the revelation. A missing masterpiece, lost to history, found in her living room for $7. Words wouldn't come. To help her process, Dr. Winston gently guided her along the painting's journey, as much as they could piece together. It may have been owned by a wealthy Dutch noble family, passed down through generations until turbulent wartime pressures threatened its confiscation or destruction. To protect it, someone hired a less talented hand to cover the elegant portrait with a plain and forgettable landscape, hoping it would escape notice. Perhaps smuggled across borders, perhaps sold quietly in desperation. Over decades, the true identity of the work faded beneath layers of secrecy. It became something anyone could own, something sold along with forgotten belongings, unrecognizable as a treasure. Now it was reborn. Evelyn sat in silence, stunned into stillness. The experts continued to explain technical specifics, but their voices turned into a distant hum as she stared at the painting. at the woman's serene face, at the pearls painted with such delicacy that they looked almost tangible. Evelyn felt tears welling in her eyes, not from sadness, but from humility. "This doesn't seem real," she finally said in a soft, trembling voice. "It is very real," Dr. Winston assured her gently, "and so is what this means for you." He opened another document containing printed communication from several art appraisers. Evelyn saw numbers, many zeros, so outrageous they may as well have been imaginary. The conservator spoke then with the calm confidence of someone used to handling priceless artifacts. "Once restored and authenticated formally, this painting will be worth several $1,000,000. "Million?" Evelyn repeated faintly, as if she'd misheard. The room waited for her to catch up with reality. Her first instinctive reaction was disbelief. Her second, strangely, was fear. Wealth on such a scale was completely foreign to her life of careful budgeting and near-empty bank accounts. The idea of suddenly possessing a fortune felt like stepping too close to a cliff's edge, thrilling but terrifying. The curator leaned forward kindly. "Mrs. Harris, this discovery will change not only the art world but your future." The words echoed through her like a bell rung in a quiet cathedral. Change, future. Two concepts she'd considered incompatible with her stage of life. People her age weren't supposed to suddenly find new beginnings. They were supposed to settle into endings. Her gaze returned to the portrait. The painted woman's eyes seemed to meet hers, not cold or distant, but with an expression of calm acknowledgement, as if she knew exactly the impact of revealing herself. One of the historians explained that media might soon become involved, that museums around the world would express urgent interest, that she would likely need legal guidance to ensure her ownership remained secure. The suggestions, though kindly intended, overwhelmed her. A knot formed in her stomach. Dr. Winston seemed to sense her distress. He placed a supportive hand atop the table and lowered his voice, speaking only to her. "You're not alone in this. We will help you through every step. This is your painting, your discovery. We're here to ensure you are protected." Those words steadied her. She swallowed thickly and nodded in thanks. Gratitude radiated through her body like warmth after long cold. One of the appraisers asked whether she had any immediate thoughts regarding potential sale. Evelyn blinked rapidly, unsure how one even began to consider selling something so immeasurably valuable. Money could solve many practical problems in her life, repairs her home needed, medical bills long deferred, comforts she had denied herself for years. But this wasn't just property. It was history. It was beauty reborn. It felt like a gift granted through fate, and she did not yet know the purpose behind it. I think I need time," she whispered. "Of course," the curator replied. "There is no rush. The restoration itself will take more time. The world waited centuries to see her again. It can wait a little longer." The room erupted into polite, relieved smiles. The tension eased, replaced by a shared sense of quiet joy. Evelyn rose slowly and walked toward the painting once more, compelled by reverence. She hovered close enough to feel the aura of artistry radiate from the canvas. "Who are you?" she murmured, her fingertips hovering just shy of touching the portrait. The woman's painted eyes shimmered back at her with serene mystery. As she stood there, Evelyn became acutely aware that her life had shifted into a different current, one that carried possibilities and challenges she had never dreamed of. Before today, she had thought her story was already mostly told, chapters closing one after another. Now it felt like a new chapter, perhaps the most important one of all, was only beginning. They walked her back to the lobby with care, guiding her through the flurry of informational pamphlets and necessary contact numbers. Dr. Winston escorted her to the door, pausing there with a smile that felt like a promise. "Go home and rest, Mrs. Harris. This is a lot for anyone. We'll take excellent care of her here, and we'll call you once we've uncovered more." More. The word lingered like a spark. On the taxi ride home, she pressed her forehead lightly against the window, watching the city pass by in soft blurs. People moved along sidewalks, intent on their own errands and concerns, unaware that one among the thousands around them carried a secret that could light up headlines across the world. Once home, she drifted through her rooms as though walking through a dream. Her house looked smaller somehow, unable to contain the enormity of the truth she now carried. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at her hands, these same hands that had hesitated to spend $7 just days ago. She thought of James, always encouraging her to seek beauty. She imagined his delight, his laughter, his pride at knowing she had helped unveil a masterpiece lost to time. That thought alone filled her with warmth so radiant it brought tears to her eyes. As night fell, she didn't bother turning on the television. The flickering light of the lamp in her living room was enough as she sat there, replaying the day's miracles. How extraordinary life could be, how unpredictable. Sometimes fate tucked its most precious gifts inside unremarkable shells, waiting for someone with a caring eye to peel back the layers. Evelyn placed a gentle hand over her heart, steadying herself against the swell of emotions. Gratitude pulsed through her. Wonder lifted her spirit. And yet, beneath it all lay uncertainty. What would become of her? What responsibility did she now bear? Not long ago, she had been a quiet widow, living out her days with modest comfort and occasional loneliness. Now, she was the owner of a masterpiece and the subject of a story soon to be told everywhere. Her life, once steady and predictable, had been thrown open like a door to a world she'd never expected to enter. And, as she finally prepared to sleep, one truth lingered stronger than all others. Nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the revelation, Evelyn awoke with a strange mixture of exhilaration and dread pressing against her chest. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, sunlight brushing gently across her face through the thin curtains, and wondered if everything that had happened the day before had only been a dream born from longing and imagination. But the flutter in her stomach told her it was real, every impossible detail of it. A lost masterpiece, a fortune, a future she had never dared envision. The world had changed around her, or perhaps she herself had changed within it. She rose slowly, feeling each muscle protest the restless night. As she shuffled toward the kitchen to brew her morning tea, her eyes lingered on the spot where the painting had rested just days ago. That place now stood empty and unremarkable, yet she couldn't help seeing it in her mind as the cradle of destiny. How quickly life's quietest corners could become the birthplace of miracles. She moved through her morning routine in a daze, a small smile tugging at her lips one moment and a tremor of fear catching her breath the next. She tried to ground herself by focusing on ordinary tasks, washing the teacup, wiping the small spill on the counter, but every action felt insignificant compared to the magnitude of what awaited her. After finishing her tea, she stepped outside to fetch the newspaper, expecting to see headlines that screamed her newfound importance. Thankfully, the world still knew nothing. For now, she was still invisible, her secret protected by anonymity. But her anonymity would not last. Later that day, As she returned from a short walk to clear her thoughts, she found a plain white envelope stuck in her mailbox. There was no stamp, no return address. Perhaps it had been hand-delivered. Inside, she discovered a neatly printed business card from a law firm she had never heard of. A note, typed on expensive paper, offered discreet advisory services regarding your recent acquisition of a significant artwork. Her stomach tightened. How had they learned so quickly? How many others already knew? The days that followed were a whirlwind. Phone calls began trickling in. First one or two, then a flood. Reporters from local newspapers, then from regional stations, all seeking interviews. She didn't know how they had found her number. Privacy seemed to be dissolving bit by bit, like the layers of paint that had hidden the portrait for so long. She ignored the calls at first, letting the answering machine absorb the intrusion, but it didn't stop there. Letters came. Unexpected visitors knocked on her door. Neighbors she barely knew suddenly remembering reasons to drop by. Some offered congratulations with two bright smiles, their eyes glancing around her home as though searching for signs of newfound luxury. Others pressed for details, hinting at opportunities, investments, partnerships. She felt herself shrinking inside, longing for the quiet solitude that had been her constant companion. Yet, every intrusion was a reminder. Her life no longer belonged solely to the small world she had inhabited. One afternoon, a knock on the door startled her so much she nearly spilled the tray of cookies she was carrying to the table. She paused before answering, smoothing her blouse nervously. When she opened the door, a tall man in a suit stood before her, his briefcase polished and posture immaculate. His smile was practiced, his voice suave as he introduced himself as a lawyer with expertise in asset protection. He claimed he wanted only to help, but his words felt slippery, like a sales pitch wrapped in silk. After a long conversation full of jargon and soft pressure, he slid a folder across her kitchen table and asked her to sign documents that would allow him to represent her best interests. Something in his demeanor, too eager, too confident, set off a warning in her heart. She shook her head gently, thanked him for his time, and insisted she needed no legal assistance at this moment. His smile tightened, irritation flickering in his eyes, but he left with a stiff politeness that did little to disguise his disappointment. As the door closed behind him, Evelyn let out a shaky breath, grateful for the small voice of caution that still guided her steps. But not every interaction was so easy to refuse. Rumors spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Children who once waved shyly now approached her boldly, asking if she would be moving into a mansion or buying a fancy car. Parents nervously trailed behind them, offering tight smiles and comments about how wonderful it must be to have such a windfall. She smiled back, but their gazes lingered too long, assessing, calculating. She began to feel like they were looking at her not as a person anymore, but as a walking treasure chest. It wasn't long before the first journalist appeared at her door, microphone in hand, a cameraman at his side. They stood there like harbingers of a world she wasn't ready to enter. Evelyn declined politely and closed the door as quickly as she could manage. She leaned against it, hand to her chest, and tried to slow her breathing. She didn't want strangers capturing her image, asking invasive questions, turning her private life into a public spectacle. She wasn't prepared for fame. She wasn't sure she wanted it at all. In quieter moments, she continued reflecting on what Dr. Winston had told her, that she was the rightful owner of the masterpiece. Legally, she was the only one with claim to it, But legality and morality were not always aligned, and Evelyn's conscience ached whenever she thought of the painting's previous owner. Mr. Grayson had sold it thinking it worthless, unaware of the treasure hidden beneath. What right did she have to claim every benefit? The memory of the weary sadness in his eyes, how he had spoken of letting go of the past, stirred empathy within her. It's not his fault, she thought. He deserved better than loneliness in a small room with fading memories for company. The burden of wealth weighed on her in ways she'd never expected. She had always assumed the rich moved through life effortlessly, untroubled by bills or worries, but now, with fortune looming over her like a tidal wave, she felt more exposed and uncertain than ever. Money attracted attention, and attention drew both admiration and predators. Even some distant relatives found her number and called. Cousins who hadn't spoken to her in years suddenly insisting they had always felt a strong connection to family. They told stories of hardships and tragedies, hoping to stir her compassion. Evelyn listened politely, but each call left her feeling more manipulated and alone. One night, overwhelmed by the barrage of demands and expectations, she sat in her dimly lit living room and cried silently. She prayed for clarity, for guidance, for strength to handle what had been placed in her hands. She spoke aloud to James, asking what he would do, wishing he could offer the comfort of his steady presence. Despite the kindness that still surrounded her in small ways, she felt untethered, as though the solid ground of her former life had transformed unexpectedly into shifting sand. Yet, amidst the chaos, a grounding force remained: the painting. Though she did not possess it physically anymore, she sensed its existence like a heartbeat beneath the surface of her days. It was still being cleaned, still revealing more of its hidden splendor. She could not wait to see it again, to witness the full beauty of what lay beneath the mask of obscurity. That hope alone became a light in the dark tangles of her fear. One afternoon, she stopped by the Art Conservation Center unannounced, needing reassurance. Dr. Winston greeted her warmly, relieved to see her. He showed her the progress that had been made. The background now revealed the suggestion of an ornate interior, the woman's dress adorned with tiny painted jewels catching the light as though real. The painting no longer looked incomplete, it looked reborn, asserting itself as a masterpiece with quiet authority. Evelyn felt awe wash over her anew. It reminded her of why she had dared to clean the painting in the first place. Beauty deserved a chance to shine. Dr. Winston noticed her troubled expression and invited her to sit. They talked, not about money, but about responsibility. He listened intently as she confessed her confusion and fear, how she struggled with the sudden shift from simplicity to unimaginable wealth, how she felt the painting was meant for something bigger than her private gain. "You have a rare opportunity," he told her gently, "an opportunity to decide the fate of something that has survived so much history. But you also have a chance to change lives, with the painting and with what it brings you." His eyes held a wisdom that calmed her. "Only you can choose what kind of legacy you wish to leave." Legacy. The word settled into her heart like a seed ready to grow. As she left the center, a thought bloomed quietly inside her. What if this miracle wasn't meant just to lift her from hardship, but to be shared? Still, her resolve faltered each time a new worry rose. What if she gave too much away and ended up struggling again? What if people took advantage of her? What if she made the wrong choice? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but a deeper truth whispered beneath her fear. She had always lived by kindness. She had always believed in helping others. Why should that change now that she finally had the means to do even more? The tension built until one evening, as she sat alone watching shadows shift across her living room walls, she glanced at the framed photograph of James. His smile, captured mid-laughter, seemed to speak directly to her spirit. She touched the photo with trembling fingers. "I know what you would say," she murmured, "that blessings are meant to be shared." A calm determination settled over her like a warm quilt. Yes, she could have luxury now. She could buy comfort, ease, extravagance. But what would those things mean if she forgot the values that had defined her entire life? She wanted to do something that mattered, something that honored the kindness that had never left her, even in her poorest days. And she could start by doing the right thing for the man who had unknowingly passed the torch of this hidden treasure into her hands. That night, like a promise made in the quiet to the stars outside her window, Evelyn decided she would share her good fortune. She would find a way to protect herself and yet ensure that others, especially those like Mr. Grayson, would benefit from this extraordinary twist of fate. She did not yet know how to accomplish it, but for the first time since the discovery, she didn't feel afraid of her future. She felt ready to shape it. Evelyn's decision, though quietly made in the stillness of her modest living room, carried a weight that seemed to settle into every corner of her life. It didn't erase the fears or uncertainties that had plagued her since discovering the true worth of the painting, but it gave her a direction, one deeply rooted in the very essence of who she was. From the moment she resolved to share her good fortune and ensure that others would be uplifted alongside her, the anxiety that had been clouding her heart began to clear. Her path was no longer shrouded entirely in confusion. There was a purpose now guiding each step she took. That purpose first led her back to the Art Conservation Center, where the masterpiece continued undergoing its transformation into the radiant painting the world had not seen for centuries. When she arrived, Dr. Winston greeted her with a smile that suggested he already expected she would come. He led her into the restoration room, now filled with bright, meticulous energy, as the team worked with steady hands and focused eyes. More of the painting had been uncovered since her last visit. The woman's full face was now visible, as was her delicate hand resting gracefully upon a ledge. The pearls at her throat shone with an almost supernatural luster, and the embroidered fabric of her gown seemed so intricate that Evelyn had to resist the urge to reach out and feel the threads between her fingertips. The scene behind her had also emerged, an interior courtyard with a stone archway framing a dramatic slice of sky. Evelyn felt breathless as she took it all in. This wasn't merely art. This was history breathing again. One of the restorers stepped back to admire their progress, and the curator approached Evelyn with a document describing projected auction values. The figures printed there had grown even larger, as interest in the painting escalated among art institutions around the globe. Collectors and museums had begun contacting the center constantly, hoping for updates, seeking opportunities to examine the painting, making early offers that seemed absurd even in fantasy. Some estimates now exceeded what Evelyn could truly comprehend. She looked from the document to the portrait's serene face. That woman's eyes held quiet wisdom, a nobility untouched by time. Evelyn wondered what the artist had seen when he painted her, what story he wanted preserved forever. In a strange, almost mystical way, Evelyn felt chosen to finish that story. Not by becoming wealthy for wealth's sake, but by ensuring the treasure's rebirth meant something greater. She decided then and there that the painting deserved a home where anyone could admire it, not a private vault where its brilliance would be hidden again, and the money it brought into her life would fuel goodness, not isolation or greed. Dr. Winston listened carefully as she explained her thoughts, nodding in agreement as though he had hoped she would choose a path like this. He spoke with deep respect, acknowledging her generosity and moral clarity. The curator concurred, offering their support to facilitate a dignified, transparent sale, most likely through a renowned auction house where the painting's rarity would shine and its value reach heights appropriate to its significance. Arrangements began. Lawyers were now necessary, but the trustworthy kind, experts recommended by the center rather than those who had slunk to her doorstep like wolves sniffing a wounded animal. They ensured Evelyn's rights remained fully intact, and her decisions honored completely. Papers were drafted. Experts verified every detail of provenance. The painting's restoration neared completion, each brushstroke resurrected with reverence until the past stood whole again. During these busy days, Evelyn made a separate appointment, one not for business, but for her heart. She traveled to the address of a retirement home where Mr. Grayson now lived. The facility was clean and orderly, filled with residents playing board games or watching television, the air tinged with the faint scent of disinfectant and lavender. It wasn't a bad place, but it wasn't home either, not for anyone forced there by life's relentless narrowing of options. A nurse led her to a small sitting room where Mr. Grayson sat by the window, gazing outside as if waiting for something that never came. His shoulders slumped slightly, and his once neat hair now hung loose and thin. When he turned to greet her, surprise widened his eyes, followed quickly by self-conscious worry as though he feared she had come to accuse him of something. "Mrs. Harris," he said slowly, trying to gather composure. "This is unexpected. I suppose you're here about the painting." His voice strained with shame he shouldn't have felt. Evelyn crossed the room and took a seat beside him, offering a gentle smile. "I'm here because you deserve to know what's happened," she said softly. She told him everything: the artist, the restoration, the valuation, the global interest. His jaw dropped, disbelief etched deep across his weathered features. "My heavens," he whispered, rubbing his face with trembling hands. "All this time, sitting in my home like a dusty trinket." His eyes grew glossy with regret. "I should never have sold it. I didn't know. How could I?" he faltered, breath hitching, as if the words themselves pierced too deeply. Evelyn reached for his hand and held it firmly. "You did nothing wrong," she assured him with all the sincerity in her soul. "You were trying to make the best choice for yourself, and I wouldn't have found the painting if not for you." He sniffed and nodded faintly, but the pain in his eyes didn't fade so easily. That was when Evelyn pulled from her purse the envelope she had been carrying, thick, sealed with care, containing a signed legal agreement and a certified check made out to him. An enormous sum, enough to change the ending of his life into something dignified, comfortable, joyful again. He tried to refuse initially, shaken by the scale of her generosity, insisting that she alone deserved the reward. But Evelyn insisted harder, meeting his emotional resistance with a steady resilience born of kindness. "I couldn't enjoy a single dollar of this if I didn't share it with you," she told him. "You entrusted me, without even knowing it, with something priceless. This is only fair." His resolve crumbled into tears. He pressed the envelope to his chest and wept, not simply for the money, but for the grace someone had shown him at a time when he had felt forgotten. Evelyn held his hand as he cried, offering comfort through silence alone. When she finally left the home, she did so feeling lighter, as though a portion of her blessings had spread outward to strengthen the world instead of weighing down her shoulders. She walked to the bus stop outside the facility, breathing deeply. For the first time since the discovery, her wealth wasn't a burden. It was a tool for goodness, an extension of her own humanity. That feeling only grew stronger when she met with the newly assembled legal and advisory team responsible for carrying out her long-term intentions. They helped her explore charitable opportunities, presenting countless examples of struggling communities, underfunded care facilities, and elderly individuals living in isolation, just as she once feared she would. Evelyn listened to each story with empathy twisting her heart. She imagined lives transformed, not by extravagance but by simple dignity restored. Her plan crystallized into a vision, a foundation dedicated to assisting seniors like her and Mr. Grayson, people whose lives had faded into shadows but still held the desire to feel valued and supported. It would provide financial help, renovate living spaces, offer companionship and human warmth. Everything Evelyn knew mattered most to the soul. She decided the foundation would bear a name reflecting tranquility and renewal, something gentle and hopeful. The working name became the Quiet Seasons Foundation, a tribute to the beauty found in life's later years when someone cared enough to notice. The legal team began structuring the foundation immediately, while financial advisors helped her open dedicated accounts to manage the funds responsibly. All of it still felt surreal to her. Meetings in polished conference rooms, discussions about tax exemptions and philanthropic strategies, but she found grounding in the purpose behind it. As long as she focused on the human impact, not the complicated logistics, she could navigate this new world without losing herself. The day of the auction arrived far sooner than she expected. The event was held in a grand hall in New York City, elegant chandeliers hanging like constellations overhead, the walls adorned with fine art destined for the highest bidders. Cameras flashed as wealthy collectors, museum representatives, and art critics filed in wearing designer attire and expensive jewelry. Evelyn felt out of place in her simple lavender dress and polished shoes, but Dr. Winston remained by her side, offering reassurance with every subtle gesture. She didn't need to dress the part. She was the part. The woman who rescued a masterpiece from oblivion. When the painting was brought out, restored to its full glory, a hush fell over the crowd. The portrait's beauty commanded attention entirely. Those luminous eyes, that serene expression, history unveiled. The auctioneer introduced the work with grand reverence, noting its miraculous rediscovery, authenticated lineage, and impeccable restoration. Bidding began almost instantly, escalating with dizzying speed as eager hands shot into the air, voices calling out amounts Evelyn hadn't even known were possible. Her heart pounded with each rising number. It felt like watching the tide rise beyond any shore she had ever stood upon. When the hammer finally fell, applause erupted. The final price, staggering beyond imagination, left Evelyn gripping the arm of her chair, eyes wide and shimmering. Dr. Winston leaned close to whisper the conversion to her after taxes and fees, and even then the number felt like one she could only count by stars in a night sky. Just like that, Evelyn Harris was a millionaire many times over. Interviews followed, though she kept them brief and dignified, focusing on the story of the painting rather than herself. Reporters were struck by her humility, by her insistence that the true miracle belonged to the art. Somehow her grace turned a sensational headline into a tale of beauty rediscovered and kindness spread. She returned home feeling not richer, but freer. Her small house looked just the same, unpretentious, familiar, beloved, and she wanted it that way. She made small improvements, comfortable furniture to ease her joints, better lighting for her reading nook, a new tea kettle that didn't sputter steam from its seams. But she didn't crave opulence. She craved meaning. That meaning soon began to flourish. The Foundation's first project launched, a renovation initiative for the retirement home where Mr. Grayson lived. Contractors replaced old beds, installed accessible bathrooms, repainted faded walls, and added spaces for socializing and community events. Evelyn attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony surrounded by residents whose smiles glowed brighter than any chandelier could achieve. Mr. Grayson stood tall beside her, healthier and happier, his hand clasped warmly around hers. News of the Quiet Seasons Foundation spread quickly, and support poured in from those moved by Evelyn's compassion. Donations arrived from strangers inspired by her choice to use her fortune for good. Volunteers signed up to visit lonely seniors, delivering meals and conversations. The groundwork was set for a legacy far greater than a single painting, one built on empathy and generosity. Day by day, Evelyn found herself renewed by this purpose. She spent more time engaging with neighbors, listening to stories of those who had quietly struggled, inviting them into the fold of her growing mission. She didn't isolate herself in luxury. She expanded the world around her so others could feel uplifted too. Yet, through all the changes, she remained the same Evelyn, the woman who saw beauty hidden beneath the surface. The woman who refused to keep fortune for herself when it could bring life and light to those forgotten by society. In the evenings, she would sit at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, letting the calm settle into her spirit. The world outside had grown louder, grander, more demanding, but her heart had grown deeper and stronger with each act of giving. She sometimes whispered her thoughts to James's photograph, imagining his pride in her courage and humility. The painting had changed everything, but it had not changed who she was. If anything, it had revealed her true nature, just as she had revealed the masterpiece beneath the dull facade. Evelyn Harris had become wealthy beyond measure, yes. But her greatest richness lay in knowing she used her blessings to bring dignity and joy into the lives of others. Fortune had knocked gently at her door. She chose to open it with grace. Time, once a quiet companion in Evelyn's life, began to move with a rhythm she had never known before. Her days filled with purpose, schedules, and meetings. Not the cold, corporate kind that consumed wealthy executives, but warm gatherings where the future well-being of elderly men and women like herself was planned with patience and hope. The Quiet Seasons Foundation had taken its first strong steps into the world, and with each passing week, it grew sturdier, its reach longer, its mission clearer. And yet, amid these changes, Evelyn never strayed far from the person she had always been. She still woke early, though now her joints greeted the morning with less ache thanks to a comfortable new mattress. She still brewed tea in the kitchen she'd known for decades, but the kettle was new and whistled cheerfully instead of sputtering steam. She still smiled at every neighbor and offered help whenever she saw a need, only now she had the means to do far more than lend a cup of sugar. Her modest home remained her sanctuary, and she refused every suggestion to move somewhere grander. Real estate agents had called her countless times offering penthouses, gated estates, waterfront villas, luxurious escapes from normal life. But Evelyn politely turned them down. She didn't want to flee the place that had held her memories, her laughter, her heartache. The small living room where she and James once danced slowly to their favorite song mattered more to her than any mansion could. Instead, she made improvements without altering the soul of her home. A new heater warmed the rooms more evenly in winter. Fresh paint brightened the walls. The garden outside flourished with roses and tulips, tended by a local gardener she hired who loved plants as deeply as she loved people. Birds began visiting her feeder daily, filling her mornings with music more valuable than any symphony. She also spent many afternoons at the retirement home where Mr. Grayson now lived more comfortably than ever. The renovations, funded by her foundation, had transformed the place. Gloomy corners were replaced with bright reading lounges. Narrow hallways widened into airy corridors decorated with cheerful artwork. Residents, once confined to old furniture and peel-in walls, now had cozy rooms with personal touches, adjustable beds, and large windows that let sunlight spill in. Evelyn often visited, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. She and Mr. Grayson took slow walks together through the courtyard garden, where blooming flowers replaced dead grass that had once symbolized forgotten souls. He regained strength in ways doctors couldn't measure. His laughter returned, his eyes regained spark, his dignity blossomed again. During one visit, he squeezed her hand, voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just give me money," he said. "You gave me back my life." Evelyn smiled with tears in her eyes, humbled by the impact of a choice she had made simply because it felt right. News of her foundation's success continued to spread. Articles praised her as the guardian of graceful aging, though she found such titles embarrassing. Television programs requested interviews more often than she could handle, but occasionally she agreed, not for fame, but to shine light on the needs of elder care across the nation. She spoke about love, dignity, and the importance of caring for those who had spent their lives caring for others. Her authenticity drew admiration far beyond her city. People donated generously to the cause, not because Evelyn asked them to, but because her kindness inspired them to take part in something meaningful. One of the proudest moments of her new life came on the day she visited the museum where the restored painting now hung. The renowned institution had acquired it through the auction, and the portrait was placed in a grand gallery beneath a spotlight that kissed every delicate brushstroke. Evelyn arrived quietly, wearing a simple navy dress. She didn't care to be fussed over or recognized. She only wanted a moment with the woman whose image had changed her fate so profoundly. As she entered the gallery, she paused a few steps away from the painting. The room fell silent, as though time itself bowed in reverence. She breathed in slowly, letting the sight wash over her. The portrait was stunning, its colors vivid, its depth mesmerizing. Viewers stood before it in awe, marveling at the renaissance of beauty thought lost forever. The woman's painted eyes seemed to shine brighter in the museum than they ever had under the years of suffocating paint that once concealed her. Nobody in the gallery knew who Evelyn was. They simply admired the masterpiece, discussing artistic techniques and historical context, and that anonymity brought her peace. She had not restored this painting to claim glory, but to give history back its missing piece. She approached the information plaque beside the painting, reading the elegant description printed in gold lettering. It told the story of its rediscovery by a humble local woman, without mentioning her name. Evelyn felt a soft smile touch her lips. She had asked the museum specifically not to credit her publicly. The real story wasn't about a lucky purchase. It was about the painting's triumphant return to its rightful place in the world. Standing there, Evelyn whispered a thank you to the woman in the portrait. "You changed my life," she murmured, "and because of you, so many others will be able to live theirs more fully. If a painted figure could smile, Evelyn would have sworn the expression softened in gratitude. When she returned home that evening, twilight draped the neighborhood in a soft lavender hue. She walked up her front steps feeling lighter than ever. The porch light flickered on automatically, and she paused to admire her flourishing flower beds swaying gently in the breeze. Inside, she set her purse down and wandered into the living room. The space glowed with calm warmth, the same room where she had first leaned the old painting against the wall, where she had looked into a future she never imagined would unfold. On that same wall now hung a high-quality framed reproduction of the masterpiece gifted to her by the museum. The copy wasn't flawless, unable to capture the exact richness of texture, but it was a reminder of the miracle that had once lain hidden beneath layers of neglect. She gazed at it fondly, like a cherished friend. The phone rang then, but not with urgency. Just the familiar chime of a neighbor calling to ask if she'd like company on a walk tomorrow morning. Evelyn chuckled and agreed. Her world was still filled with humble moments, laughter, and connection. Weeks became months, and the Quiet Seasons Foundation continued to expand. Evelyn wasn't always on the front lines. She preferred to guide quietly, letting capable, compassionate people carry out the work. But she made it a point to personally review stories of those they helped. A widower who no longer ate alone because the foundation provided a volunteer companion. A retired teacher whose failing eyesight was restored through sponsored surgery. A veteran who had spent years in silence finding his voice again through group art therapy funded by Evelyn's efforts. These victories were priceless, far more valuable than the millions deposited into accounts with her signature. Children in the neighborhood especially loved visiting her. Word had spread of the grandmotherly lady who performed miracles with a kind smile and gentle heart. They would sit cross-legged on her living room floor while she told stories, not of wealth and auctions, but of small wonders and the hidden potential within ordinary things. She taught them that sometimes greatness arrives disguised in dust and shadows, waiting for the right person to look closely enough. "Remember," she would say, leaning forward with a playful sparkle in her eyes, "you never know where the next miracle might be hiding." They listened with wide eyes, believing every word. One summer afternoon, she hosted a community gathering in her backyard. Tables lined with homemade dishes, some prepared by grateful residents from the retirement home, created a feast that filled the air with warm aromas. Neighbors mingled, children played tag, volunteers shared success stories, and laughter echoed beneath the soft sway of string lights overhead. Evelyn sat near the garden roses, enjoying the music of happiness surrounding her, feeling the invisible thread connecting every soul in her small world. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining James sitting beside her. She could see him so clearly, his smile proud and gentle, his arm wrapping around her shoulders as he whispered, "You did good, Evelyn. You did real good." She blinked away a tear, but it was a tear born from joy, not sorrow. Love never truly left, it simply changed shape. Later, when the celebration wound down and the stars appeared like scattered diamonds against the night sky, Evelyn retired indoors with a full heart. She walked into the living room and paused once more before the portrait's reproduction. Moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating the painted woman's face in a soft, ethereal glow. Evelyn traced the air before it, her fingertips hovering just short of the frame. She didn't need to touch it. She had already touched so many lives through the miracle it revealed. Her story had changed forever. Yet she remained grounded in the values that defined her long before wealth entered her life: compassion, humility, and generosity. All that had happened, the discovery, the recognition, the fortune, had led her to this moment where she stood, content and fulfilled, knowing she had honored both the gifts she'd been given and the people who needed help the most. She whispered into the quiet, speaking to the past, the present, and the future all at once. "Thank you." The house answered with peaceful silence, as steady and comforting as always. Evelyn stepped away from the portrait and turned off the lights. She headed to bed with a soft smile touching her lips, already looking forward to tomorrow, a day full of new opportunities to bring a little more kindness into the world. Because in the end, the true masterpiece was not the painting she found, but the legacy she created by uncovering its beauty and choosing to share that beauty with everyone. And that legacy, stitched lovingly into the hearts of countless souls, would shine far longer than any treasure ever could. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe. We have so many more incredible real-life adventures coming your way. Don't miss what happens in the next video. You'll be shocked by what they discover. And share this video